Yeah, we didn't talk about bribery and corruption, but I thought a little talk about appreciation for your Christoph, it's not coffee, it's tea. And actually, Christoph has to run, Christoph Busma has to run because there's an espresso event happening in aluminium stewardship initiative event happening at 1. So again, thank you for the 3 pragmatic presentations. I hope it was valuable to you. The next presenter is from Dean Sanders. He is a marketing consultant, marketing professional for many, many years. He's worked with fast-moving consumer goods, but has asked me to confirm now that he is now very much focusing on the sustainability aspect as well, and already trying to marry both. So, Dean, the floor is yours. You've got basically 15 minutes that will allow us then also for some questions and answers afterwards, and I'll moderating that.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Actually, I've got a few more slides in than you can normally comfortably fit into a 15-minute presentation. So if I'm going to step on the gas a little bit, I hope you can all keep up with me. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in the Conservation Campus. Perhaps just a quick word. This is one.
It might be off.
There we go. Just a quick word about the mission of the company that I founded 15 years ago in London. The mission of the company is to help commercial organizations to create an economic return on their social and environmental investments. And actually there are many ways in which organizations can respond to that challenge, both in their operations, in their innovation capacity, in the way that they become more efficient in the use of resources, in the way that they gain access to raw materials. There are many, many different ways we at Goodbrand help organizations to find the economic return on their investments into social and environmental issues. But the focus of today's presentation is to look at one very discrete and specific part of that value add opportunity, which is the value that's created in the brand. And I think we know that branding and reputation has become a critical issue for business. In fact, it's no longer just about the smart management of reputation, about having the knowledge and the capability to manage a brand, but it's about the wise management of brands, having a heightened level of mindfulness and perceptiveness about the way brands work and the way that they engage not just with consumers but with citizens. And I think what we've seen is that there's a kind of development of a series of sort of spikes and troughs in the post-war period, where I think after specific crises like the Second World War, there was an era of austerity and the consumer paradigm was, I need stuff. And brands responded by making stuff available consistently high quality and functional. Then I think in the 80s we entered this age of opulence where very much the consumer mood was, I want stuff, more, bigger, faster, cheaper. And I think now, as we come through this period of insecurity and uncertainty, characterized by the financial crisis and the bad news crisis, we believe that there's an emerging age of meaning whereby the citizen paradigm, and I think we'll find ourselves talking more, at least I hope we will, about citizens rather than consumers, there's a desire for belonging and connection and meaning. And brands can respond to that, I think, by offering to offer fulfillment in terms of just being smarter, fitter, wiser, closer, fairer, more open, more trustworthy. I think that what we're seeing, this interesting global data from Cohen Roker in the US, looking at the kinds of values that are emerging as being important values for citizens and consumers internationally, coming back down to some fundamental, basic, universal human values of family protection, of honesty, of reliable relationships. We believe that the opportunity for brands and for companies who own and steward brands is to help citizens to lead better lives in in a sense, to contribute to an overall requirement for more meaning and purpose and value in the lives that we lead. And they can do that by offering to help you look after your family, enhance your potential, help you to flourish as an individual, as a community, invest in the future, ensure positive legacy. And they can do that in two ways. Firstly, intrinsically, in the very product and service that they offer to you, in the transaction that you have with them, but also by connecting with wider networks and by catalyzing wider series of changes. And so we believe that what companies are going to need as we move into this new phase is they're going to need to build not just brand equity in the typical way that that's measured on balance sheets, which is the kind of goodwill that's residual in the brand, is kind of driver of long-term loyalty and relationship with stakeholders, particularly customers, but they're going to need social equity. Brands are going to need to build and develop social equity, which is a level of public confidence in the level of capability of a brand to manage itself wisely in this complex world in which they are operating. And so we've developed, with some experts on quantitative research methodology, a tool which we call the Social Equity Index. And the Social Equity Index is essentially an online tool that asks citizen consumers some questions. And we've done that in about a dozen countries, asking about 25,000 people and around 2,000 brands. We've collected data to try to find out what's going on and what are the drivers of loyalty and preference, and how does social equity work? How do brands build social equity? And then we throw all the numbers into a box and we come out with one number, which makes it a little bit easier for us to manage and to present. But of course there's a lot more data behind that. The first thing that we've managed to formalize and conceptualize in what's part of this research methodology is there are 6 factors that make up the social dimension of branding. The degree to which brands are seen as contributing to environmental issues, looking after their customers, looking after and engaging in communities at a local level, ensuring fairness and equity in their supply chains, taking care of their own employees, and making a significant and positive contribution as citizens in the wider societal context. And then what we do, like all good consultants, is we throw all of that into a matrix to make it easy for us to understand, hopefully easy for you to understand. And we've essentially done 2 things, is we've mapped the social equity that brands have, but also, very interestingly, how energetic are they? Are they on the move? Are they innovative? Are they dynamic? Are they purposeful? Are they doing stuff? Because what we found is there are actually a whole bunch of brands that are extremely trustworthy and exceptionally ethical, but they're a bit dull and they're a bit boring. I'm afraid to say that some of those tend to be NGO brands. That they are full of goodwill, but there's not much happening in the eyes of the citizen, in the eyes of the perception of consumers. There are, of course, another whole bunch of companies and brands and even organizations that are neither energetic nor particularly good. There are a whole bunch of companies which are very innovative, very dynamic, but with perhaps questionable integrity, but real high-tech brands in that box. And then you have this top box of organizations, and I say that deliberately because it's a mix of public organizations, non-government organizations, and commercial brands that are positioning themselves as shapers of this new future. And in fact, we can even refer to them as trusted leader brands. And this is where we find an exceptionally high correlation between that score and the level of preference and loyalty that customers and consumers have with that brand. So what we're saying is brand social energy, which is being good, being a force for good, but also a force for change, correlates to preference and loyalty in customer transaction. So here you see lots of little dots on that very same matrix, which shows you more or less how this works. This is an example from my country. For those of you who haven't yet guessed, that is the United Kingdom. And in the UK, you see very clearly that the red dots, or way up there in the top right, those are the non-government organisations brands. They are the brands that in the UK are perceived to be the brands that are on the move and good. And people like that. People appreciate that. They are loyal. They feel a connection at the bottom with those brands. There are, of course, a few other blue brands up there, which are some of the classic classic social brands of Marks and Spencer, The Body Shop, Innocent, some of you may be familiar with Brandscape in our country. But what the point I want to make here is those of you who are stewarding, looking after, managing non-government organization brands have a very significant asset in terms of both social equity and brand energy that has value for organizations that choose to partner with you. They may choose to partner with you for operational reasons, but there's an additional brand social equity building opportunity that is also there and needs to be valued and taken into consideration. What we've also seen is that Rainforest Alliance, a member of IUCN, an organisation that I've had the opportunity to do quite some work with, these brands are even becoming stronger in time. As their awareness develops and builds, and the number of partnerships they're engaged in and they communicate in the market war, they're actually gaining more traction in both terms of social equity, but also in terms of overall awareness and energy. What you see down the bottom left, and I'll come on to that in a moment, are coffee companies that have chosen to work with Rainforest Alliance and are benefiting from the goodwill and the social equity inherent in the Rainforest Alliance brand. This is an example of a brand in Austria. Is there anyone from Austria here? Yeah, we have an Austrian. So look to Ursprung, back to the origin, which is an own-label brand in the supermarket chain in Austria, which has very strong connection with farmers and enables consumers to go through apps or digital to access a fully traceable supply chain back to an organic production system in Austria. And as a consequence of this, here we see some Ursprung in the Austrian dairy category way up there in terms of the social energy that it's demonstrating and the leadership that it's demonstrating in that country. So every day of the week in Austrian dairy yogurt was shared as information in one of these seminars, but it's an extremely interesting case. It's one of the best performing dairy category in Europe and one of the strongest environmental performers. Every now and then a company comes to a kind of critical point in its life cycle or brand where it suddenly realizes that the share of voice is kind of going against it. Yeah. Things used to be swinging its way and suddenly it doesn't really feel like that anymore. And you'll all be very familiar with all of the chaos and confusion around the reputation of McDonald's over the last 5 to 10 years. But I think it's fair to say that this is a company that has realized it's time to change. It's time to initiate a new contract, a new relationship with its stakeholders. Whatever you might think around say we have different views, I'm sure, this is a company that has acknowledged things were not working for its brand and has decided to implement some activities, change activities, whether that's opening up farms in the UK or working with certified coffee, one of the biggest suppliers or producers or sellers of certified coffee in Europe. And we see that Ronald is loving it, all the way from being down in the old follower box over here, and then over a period of time migrating into the social energy box as a direct consequence of making operational changes, connecting with NGOs and co-branding activities to gain public and consumer confidence. In the coffee sector, we find a lot of activity. A lot of companies are beginning to boost the level of social equity that they have by, again, sharing the work that they do with their partners, whether that's Starbucks with fair trade certification or platforms such as the Nespresso collaboration platform, its own sustainability frame, or whether it's the Kenco coffee company belonging to Kraft Foods. And what we see here, and I showed that a little bit earlier, is companies beginning to get a social equity transfer effect from their NGO partners into their own brand performance. And in fact, very interestingly, if you dig in, I mentioned before the 6 factors, you can even get to the level of understanding just what is it specifically that I can draw from the partnership, in this case with Rainforest Alliance. And here you see Rainforest Alliance is an organisation that has extremely high levels of environmental equity within that social equity. And if you look at Kenco, you see that has directly transferred across. So Kenco, as a coffee brand in the United Kingdom marketplace, has gained an environmental equity bonus and boost as a consequence of, firstly, working with Rainforest Alliance to certify value chains, and secondly, disseminating that message and information to a wider public. just some fun, important principles for you to think about. The first, and I think this was hopefully culturally appropriate, given where we are, but the concept of balance. And we think that there's an interesting balance going on in communicating social and sustainable branding between a corporate requirement to secure reputation against attack, often by activists or by disgruntled or dissatisfied citizens, but by the same token, a desire to build trust. And I think many people managing brands in commercial organizations are struggling with this dilemma and finding it very difficult to find this balance. And actually, you could argue they need a certainly different way of thinking about the world, which can come from participation in NGO partnerships to find that balance. So it's not just about being scared to say anything, because as soon as you say something, someone's going to shoot you down. But it's also not about rushing off and saying, hey, Eureka, we've changed, we found it, because there may be an exposure to risk inherent in that. So one of the most important principles, we think, is to find balance between saying just the right thing at just the right time, just the right way, just the right people, and taking advice on that, discussing that as a consequence and as a benefit of Mark. Mark Twain said many wise things. This is one of the rather fun things that he said. The great thing about telling the truth is you don't have to rely too much on your memory. Yeah, and I think that this is true in corporate communications around sustainability. As soon as you might be tempted to say something even marginally not quite as true as it should be, you're heading for trouble. Okay? So I think the opportunity to be truthful, in my experience, people respond extremely well to truth. Yeah? If it's told in an open and transparent way, even if companies commit themselves to big global objectives will reduce carbon emissions 20%, and they hit 17%. Telling that 17% has a power and energy equivalent to saying, hey, we've got 20%. Okay, and I think that's a really important learning. It goes back a little bit to this balance between securing reputation, having the confidence to build trust. Truth is important. There's nothing else to take away from this presentation. I'm sure you all know that. But just to remind us all, truth is extremely important in communications. I think the third thing is consistency. One of the things I've been very privileged to work in over the last couple of years is a partnership between Nespresso, coffee producer, coffee roaster in Switzerland, global company, but which is sort of a very interesting partnership with the Rainforest Alliance again, the coffee value chains. It's a global partnership that's been going for 10 years. And what I've really seen is that relationship develop and mature and flourish over 10 years. Next year is the 10th anniversary of the program. And I think that just being consistent, in fact, this chap, Chris Woody, some of you may know him, the head of Sustainable Agriculture, Rainforest Alliance, is a man who has encouraged Nespresso to be truthful, to be forthright, to be open, to be objective, to be modest, as part of this partnership. It's not really a communication guy, he has a journalistic background, he's an agriculture expert, and he has been a tremendously wise counsel to Nespresso as part of this partnership. We were very excited to see some of the farmers who farm coffee from Nespresso in New York meeting coffee consumers in a boutique in Soho as part of an award that they received from Rainforest Alliance. And I think the final thing, this is my advertising plug because I am after all a marketing guy. Those of you who enjoy coffee might like to go and meet Doña Luz Marina from Colombia, who is a Rainforest Alliance certified coffee producer from Anselmo in Colombia, supplying and selling her coffee through a cooperative to Nespresso. And here she is, serving coffee to participants at the IUCN World Congress this week. You are all invited to meet her. Stands up for another couple of days as an event talking about sustainable coffee certification this afternoon. I think what I want to say with this is that one of the things that we've learned the most from João Perez from Nespresso, the head of the sustainability platform at Nespresso, is being with these farmers, being with their farmers and learning about their lives. So there's also a Twitter kind of thing buzzing around with information about Doña Marina. So if you'd like to have a look at that, please do. That concludes my presentation. I'd love to take questions if you have any.
Yes, Dean. We're going to take some questions. I'm just warning you that I want to make sure that we give also the time for Dylan for the last session. So I'm only going to take 2 or 3 questions. And Dean, hopefully you're available and there's actually some events next to the press, so just after this session as well, back at the Congress, so I'm sure that then Dean will be available for some of these questions. I have a question to you, Dean. May I quickly ask it? Yeah. Where is IUCN on the Grand Energy now?
Actually, IUCN as a power organisation doesn't feature in the study that we've done. It's a good challenge and one that we should rectify.
Okay. Jeff.
Dean, you've made me very scared.
That was the
When you're at the top, you really can only go down. And I wondered if you'd look into how association of organizations that have high social power and energy with much lower organizations have brought them down rather than us lifting them up.
Yeah, it's a good question. Actually, I mean, I don't think that there's a limit to that model. It's an index, so you can index higher and higher and higher. The good news is Rainforest Alliance, Jeff works with Rainforest Alliance, is that there's still potential. On an index, you can keep going. Of course, I think that there's a whole kind of 2/3 of the iceberg behind this PowerPoint, which is